chat about scope debugging, let's imagine a little program that calculates the average from a number of grades. The grades themselves are shown in the first line, 100, 95, 93, all the way to 82. As always, don't worry too much about how this actually works for now. We'll talk about everything that you see later. For now, let's just focus on what the bug might be. Notice also that I've taken the first line here and broken it up into 2 lines, but I've kept the numbering the same. That's just so that it'll fit on the screen as you see it here. In actual code, these 2 would just be 1 line. You might see that in a few places in our course, especially as our material gets a little bit more complex. In this case, we could manually calculate the average of those grades to know what output to expect. We add those numbers together on a calculator, we divide by 12, and we should find that the average should be 89. But right now the average is calculated as 6.83333. So something isn't working. How do we find out what's wrong? Well, there's no errors, so they don't have anything for us to go on. So we might start with print debugging. The way we discussed it, we might just add some print statements throughout our program so that we can trace through how it's running. Here we've added one for calculating early on, and we've added a statement that says whenever we add a new grade to our running sum. Why would we do this? Well, maybe one thing that's going wrong is that our program isn't actually looping over all the grades. Maybe it's only averaging based on one of them. So we would run this to make sure it really is running 12 times to add each grade to our running average. You actually don't really need to worry about how the code works for this. You can imagine just doing this by hand. Imagine watching over someone's shoulder and seeing that instead of adding all the numbers in a calculator, they're just entering them one after the other. So we've added these print statements, and we see that sure enough, the code is adding each grade to the running sum, or at least it looks like it is. It's not skipping any grades, so skipping some numbers isn't the reason why our output is so wrong. So now we're at a bit of a loss. The code is correctly touching each of the 12 grades, but the sum it's computing is wrong. What's going on here? Well, to check this further, we want to narrow our scope down a little bit. We know the code is wrong because we checked the average and found that it should be 89 instead of 6.83. Let's now basically do the same thing throughout the entire program as well. Instead of just comparing at the end, let's compare every step along the way. We know, for example, that when we've only added 1 grade, our sum should be 100. Once we've added 2 grades, our sum should be 195, and we could calculate the rest as well. So if we check the sum every stage of the process, hopefully we can see where it gets off track. So let's try that. So I've removed the print statement that just printed whenever a new grade was added, and I've added this one. Instead of just printing that a new grade was added, it's actually printing the sum each time. Now you haven't seen this syntax before that lets you print both a string of characters and a number. We'll talk about that more later. For now, let's just look at what that lets us do as far as debugging is concerned. We know that this prints the sum after every individual number is added, so it should be 100 after 1 run, 195 after 2 runs, and so on. What do we see? Well, sure enough, after 1 run, it's 100. But after 2 runs, it's just 95. After 3 runs, it's just 93. And so at the end, it's just 82. 82 divided by 12 equals 6.833, and so on. So we figured out what's going on. At the end of all this, it's dividing 82 by 12 instead of dividing the sum of all these numbers by 12. Why is that happening? Well, now we have something to go on. Now we can look at our code and see if we can explain why we're getting this output. Our sum isn't changing correctly, so let's look at where our sum is modified. Well, we modify our sum on line 3, but that's just to set it initially equal to 0. So it's probably not there. The only other place it's changing is on line 7, where it says sum equals grade. Now we don't yet know how variables work yet, how assignment works yet, how values work yet. We don't really know much about code at all. But we can kind of infer that it makes sense that maybe that takes the current value of grade and assigns it to sum. That would mean that every time this runs, the current sum just changes to the current grade. And sure enough, that makes sense with what we see. After 1 run, it's 100. After 2, it's 95, and so on. So now we know where we need to make our fix. It's on that line right there. And what do we need to do? Well, we need to make sum correctly update to be the previous sum plus the new grade. So let's try that. I've now changed this line to say sum equals sum plus grade. So instead of just setting the sum equal to the current grade, it'll add the current grade to the current sum and set that equal to the sum. Now that's going to sound weird because we're assigning a variable to its own value, and that's kind of confusing and strange. Don't worry yet about how this exactly works. We'll talk about this plenty pretty soon. For now, just observe that after we've made that change, sure enough, our sum is now printed correctly. Our result is now 89. We haven't covered how this code exactly works yet, but the principle here is that if you're getting a result that isn't the one you expect, one thing you can do is debug each individual little part of the program in turn and try to find where it goes off the rails. Here we knew that after we added two numbers, our sum should be 195. So before, when we saw that the sum after two numbers was just 95, we could tell that that's where something was going wrong. Now we see that the sum after two numbers is correctly listed as 195, and so we know it's working pretty well, and plus our final output matches what we would expect as well.